Welcome back to the No More Trauma podcast and TV episode. If you're not listening to me on SoundCloud or Apple iTunes, you can see me here on YouTube. So, my name is Tanya. I am a trauma survivor, coach, trauma informed yoga teacher, and wellness facilitator. So, my mission is to offer a safe place for healing, inspiration, and mental health tips for living a trauma free lifestyle. So, on and off the mat. I like to, hop on this podcast and talk about all things wellness. So, welcome if it's your first time tuning in. So excited that you are here. So, thank you. So today we have an interesting topic. I'm really excited for this topic. And today we're going to be discussing trauma and nonverbal communication. Did you know trauma was also nonverbal? So Tanya, what is that? So have you ever heard the phrase, let's see, so the phrase, the word I'm looking for, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Or if anything at all. It's not what they said, it's what they didn't say and how someone may present themselves, right? So trauma can shift the way the brain processes emotions, physical experiences, and nonverbal cues. It can also trigger the brain to search for safety, when aroused due to previous childhood threats. So it's important to not only listen to your body, right? I've been hearing that a lot. A lot of people say, oh, listen to your body, listen to the alarm systems in your body that's happening around people and in certain environments. I'm hearing that a lot now. And it has some truth to it. So when aroused due to previous childhood threats, and again, when we listen to not only our body, the emotional dialogue that it's playing when it's within company of others, but it also communicate what it is that you're feeling for clarity to ensure you're not misinterpreting a nonverbal cue or characteristic to past related traumatic experiences. Okay. So, how did we get here, right? How did we come to this topic? I'm really speaking of me. I'm actually I really am excited to dive in today. So recently, I was in therapy session explaining to my therapist my desire to, self-examine the ways in which I communicate or feel, presently in the company of others. A little disclaimer, I am always, almost to a fault, self-reflecting and looking at myself in what ways that I can improve. I think it has its good and bad. There can be some good to that, where there's some emotional intelligence and, the ability to step outside my ego and just look at myself in which ways that I can self-improve. And also it can just be, I wouldn't say insecurity, but it's just, sometimes you can self-sabotage because you're constantly reflecting so much. So if you're one of those, definitely start the conversation over in, maybe I'd say, the YouTube channel where you can leave comments, or you can always I'm sure you can leave comments either also underneath these podcasts. So if you're on SoundCloud, you can leave comments. I know in Apple you cannot, so you can always stay in touch with me and we can start a discussion. So back on track here, just constantly self-reflecting and wanting to constantly improve who I am. And so what I haven't shared As of last year, I was reading a book, Assertiveness for Earth Angels. I've shared in a earlier podcast how I show up in terms of trauma, and for my trauma response, that being of fawning, so like people pleasing and sometimes shutting down. So that can also look like freezing. And so sometimes I can silence and shut down, which isn't a healthy form of communication, especially if you're trying to resolve conflict. So I recognize that. And so, where am I going with all this? Yeah, so so in that space of, just trying to be assertive and to make sure that I'm articulating myself. So she asked me if I felt safe enough to be in the present moment, one, right? And if I felt the need to perform or dim my light, okay? And so she also asked if the cues demonstrated by the individuals around me or whoever I am in company with, if those cues felt unsafe, and that cue can be an unsafe stored memory, and if the brain was telling me that I couldn't be myself. Oh my goodness, this is just the intro. It is going to be so good today. So lastly, if the nonverbal cues were related to how I was taught to respond to a previous trauma, this session is sparked not only on clarity for myself, but I wanted to share what I've learned and what I've been obsessing about, because I am really, I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it. I'm obsessed with body language in the way that humans communicate without words. Ooh, okay. Probably because I'm a feeler, so I can feel. I'm all in the field, so I can always feel the emotions. And for me, what you don't say can sometimes ring loud for me. So yeah, let's get into it. So the first thing is, how does the brain store and compartmentalize trauma? So there's 3 parts of the brain, and you have your neocortex, which stores the thoughts, language, reasoning. This is your the rational part of the brain, your imaginations, and your consciousness. So that is when we think of the brain, we think of that gray, white matter, fleshy part of the brain. And then we have the limbic system, which are the emotions, the memories, yes, the stored memories, habits, and decisions. And then we have the brainstem, okay? So if you think of the brain, so going back to where the memories and the emotions are stored, so it's that inner center of the brain, right? And then the brainstem is I would like to call it the tail, right? That goes all the way down through the spine. So that brainstem and the cerebellum, this is where your trauma responses are at autopilot. So this is how you respond, okay? So the trauma responses starts in the lizard brainstem, okay? With the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, submit responses, and then the limbic brain holds the images you saw and the emotions you felt at the time of a trauma. So that's also where the nonverbal memories are stored. So right in that center there, right in that center is where that information, that memory is being stored. So another thing that she had mentioned to me, I'm trying to think back, so that fleshy part of the brain, like when you're doing talk therapy, it's really like that gray matter and that gray-white fleshy matter, right? And then when we start to do the, say, the cognitive therapy, I believe she said EMDR work, right? Or like brain spotting, that's where it's going to be hidden in the limbic system. So right in the center, just kind of pulling out that information. So now that we know how the brain compartmentalizes trauma, so let's get into the juicy part, the non-verbal communication and characteristics. So non-verbal, so first I want to disclose what nonverbal communication is. So nonverbal communication is the act of communicating without language, oral or written words. So this can be forms of facial expressions. It can include gestures, eye movement, eye contact, tone of voice, how the body and the brain processes tone of voice. This can be touch, physical space, and your personal parameters. Okay, and then your nonverbal cues are learned during your childhood, and so it's then later developed as unconscious behavior when we become adults, right? We do it so long it becomes, second nature. It's a part of who we are, right? We don't even have to think about it. And so we begin to observe these cues. The reason why it's important, especially, for survivors, and, most importantly, is we begin to observe these cues to determine its authenticity, right? And affection, or to begin to notice if this is being used as a form of deception and manipulation. Okay, so again, just making sure that a part of our trauma recovery is learning, right? Learning from our mistakes and learning from our patterns, the patterns that show up, and then starting to decipher, does this feel good? Asking ourselves, does this feel good? Is my body recognizing something, right? So speaking of the body, to keep the body balanced, I have been, again, another latest of my faves and obsessions is the Magic Mind Elixir. So Magic Mind is a 2-ounce elixir that was created by James Bashira, and so he created this elixir to balance the mind, and it's something that you can take, a simple shot that you can take. You don't have to replace like your morning coffee or your morning smoothie. You can actually take it alongside your normal, drink that you have in the morning. I'm actually right now having something green, speaking of green. But Magic Mind is definitely one of my practice. As you know, I've been mentioning it for, all of my most recent episodes is creating a practice and keeping the body and mind in balance. So the elixirs actually include some of my favorites like matcha and ashwagandha, as well as honey. And if you like some of those things, or you're looking for something to include into your morning practice, then I definitely, recommend Magic Mind. So you can visit the website at magicmind.co/N like Nancy, M like Mary, T like Tango, or No More Trauma. So NMT. So you can use my code at it's NMT40, so 40, to get a discount off of your subscription of either a box of 15 elixirs, or if you like to meal prep like myself and stay ahead of the game and get a box of 30 elixirs. So again, that's magicmind.co/N like no, M like more, T like trauma, and use my code. I'll keep all of that information down below, so that way you have all of the information to pick you up some. So as far as the characteristics of what nonverbal cues look like, it can look like the facial expression of, say, shock or horizontal, raised eyebrows. It can also display anger, right? Either squinched eyes or bulging eyes, a clenched jaw, or a look of disgust, inflated nostrils, and raising one side of the mouth. Eye contact, someone, if you ever had that experience where someone is just staring you down, and so it can either convey interest, both positive and negative energy. Okay, so you have to decipher, is this eye contact, conveying hostility, dominance, or power? And then there are gestures. So the gestures, it's important to really understand that, first off, culturally, it can look different, right? So, what can look as a gentle gesture here in the United States, it can look different, say, in the UK, or say in oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank here, Australia. It can look, different for, individuals in the Middle East. So it's important to really, I wouldn't, just understand that, to not misinterpret is the word that I'm looking for. So hand gestures can be waving of the hand, it can be pointing fingers, or it can be signaling. I knew for me growing up, it was, my mother would say, don't point. Why are you pointing? Don't point over there. And so, that can, be something of, it can be, insulting when someone's pointing. And then I go to school and, kids are pointing at each other, and it's like, hey, don't do that. So tone of voice, pitch, inflection of the voice, pace, listening, being mindful of the cadence, if it's high or low. And is there a sense of mirroring? Are you mirroring me? Is there sarcasm? Is there spaces in between your words? And are you projecting aggression, okay, with the tone of the voice? And so now we look at body language, right? So body language can be shaking the foot, which can suggest irritation or anxiety, impatience. Crossing or folding the arms can convey power or disinterest. Touching the chin or the neck for appeasement, or it can be dishonesty, right? Someone not being, honest or telling the truth, right? Straightforward. And so turning the body away, right? For a way out of the conversation or out of your presence, right? So physical touch, this can be a warm hug, grabbing the arm, it can be, grabbing the neck or grabbing clothing, or, a condescending pat on the back or a pat on the head, or it can also convey an affectionate touch. Then there's that physical space, right? Your personal space. Are you invading my personal space to translate power? And are you invading my space to intimidate me, to show aggression or interest or intimacy, right? So, I know for individuals, like myself, with anxiety, navigating that world of anxiety, it's important to really listen to the body, to breathe, notice what you start to feel maybe in the chest, what you're feeling in the belly, right? And I want to really talk about like my personal experiences, briefly here. So one of my personal experiences in the workplace is in the world of sales. I've been in sales, my goodness. I think we're all in sales, honestly. We're all selling who we are, and we're all entrepreneurs, and I think we're all, salesmen in our own right. But what I would notice in that industry, there wasn't personal space, and so I remember, when I was in car sales, there was this idea, if I get you a deal, I first have to build trust, and I want you to come closer. So I may lean in as if I'm giving you a big deal or a discount, right? Or it was complete silence and complete observing the client to be able to identify what it is that they needed, okay? And so I was always leaned in, or there was a long period of eye contact to make sure I was gathering information. And so another experience of mine in the workplace as a server, so I used to serve at the famous Chili's, and so oh my goodness, I remember as I was working there, it was so nerve-wracking because I worked at a really busy location, and there was people in and out, and especially on the weekends, it would get really crowded. And during my training process, I remember the general manager, he would say, if you see if your table is a party of a mother and children, or if there are children, you want to kneel at the table. Don't take the order standing over them, because it presents a sense of dominance, right? And so to show that you are kind of submitting and that you were friendly is that you wanted to kneel down and allow yourself to, feel almost vulnerable or personable with the table and the guests, right? And so you want to open up this space of trust, where, tell me what you would like, to build rapport before, you take the order. And, at that point, you are bound to supposedly have a good relationship with this table. And so you were due to get a good tip, right? Or they were to have a good experience, okay? So that was the nonverbal cue that I was taught in the workplace. Now, on the other side of that, so say, growing up for me, and I'll just kind of just be transparent here, one of what my body was remembering for me, in some of my experiences, is that as an adult, what it remembered is, say, a shaking of the head, right? And if someone shook their head at me, that meant to me a feeling of disgust or disapproval. The person didn't approve of me. And so, or a clenching of a jaw, meaning that I had upset someone. And so I had, that my unconsciously my body has remembered that. So when I see someone who's shaking their head or clenching their jaw or raising their eyes, it immediately, my body sees it as danger, okay? Or a moment where I cannot be myself, right? And so the notion is to understand that this is all, you know, personable, right? It's what may be, you know, alarming to my body may not be alarming to someone else, right? And I may misinterpret that, and it's best to communicate that. So a little bit more of what my perceptions are, or closed off energy by folding the arms, turning the body away, meaning, you know, that you're not a, you know, the experience is not of interest. Walking fast is that you're either upset or disappointed, right? I have to laugh because whenever a good friend of mine is from New York and tends to walk really, really fast, and so I used to say, "Hey, what's wrong? What is the issue here?" And so, "What are you talking about? I'm just walking." And, you know, for me, that, you know, what I had interpreted as, oh, I thought you were upset or something happened and you were just trying to run off. So, you know, my perception. And so a conversation had to be had, because I was like, what is happening? I perceived it as something else. So tightening the jaw, glaring your eyes, or shaking your head meant that I was a problem. And so, you know, that is my perception of what those nonverbal cues mean and what my body perceives it as, right? And so, kind of going back to what I was mentioning in the beginning, is that, you know, it felt like I couldn't be myself, or that I had to shrink because there was some sort of disappointment, right? So, really, what I invite you, excuse me, is, you know, as I start to bring this to a close here, is really observe the nonverbal cues post-trauma, right? And we've all experienced some form of another, and observe your body, right? The alarm systems within your body. And it can really tell you a lot about not just yourself, but the presence, as well as what memory has been stored within your nervous system. So understanding and communicating about someone's nonverbal cues can really support emotional awareness, right? That's why this is important, right? And so it can also build trust, okay? And the related intentions. What are the intentions in this experience? Why do I feel this way? You know, maybe having an awareness of what you feel, or what you observe, and bring it to the surface and begin to have a dialogue about it, right? You know, if you're presented that opportunity, hopefully you are. It's also critical to know that nonverbal cues can have different meanings amongst other cultures. Really, really important, okay? Not only other cultures, but the neurodivergent community, neurodiverse community, or others that may have challenges with other psychological conditions, okay? And so it's important that we don't just assume, and again, be able to start communication if you're given that opportunity, but listen to your body, right? And kind of do a downward spiral, is to think about what it is that you feel, right? What you have observed, and to connect that with the first time that you felt that, okay? And so I was able to do that within my therapy session. I won't share that here, but, you know, maybe you can do that when you start to feel like you're not being yourself, you're not being authentic, start to see if you can trace that back to the first time that you felt that way, right? What it is that you feel, okay? What did you observe? What is it that you what do you feel? What is it that you feel that you felt? Oh my gosh, my goodness, I'm all tongue-tied here. I'm gonna just start yelling out a whole yoga sequence. Anywho, I'm teasing. And you know, trace it back to the first time that you felt that way. Okay. So I thank you for tuning in. Journal prompts, I'll call out. There's about 5 journal prompts. I am going to stick the journal prompts in the notes, but I do want to call out some of those, at least 2. So that way you can ponder, and it'll remind you to come back to this episode to make sure you take the notes or download the PDF. I'm going to include a PDF in the show notes. So, what nonverbal cues, gestures, or facial expressions were demonstrated as trauma to you, right, for you, or a nonverbal cue or gesture or facial expression that translated unsafety? Okay. What sensations in your body do you experience with someone who demonstrates these nonverbal cues or characteristics? Okay, so I just wanted to call out those 2, that way you can kind of ponder. Maybe you start a conversation with a family member or a friend, and then if not, you can always start communication on the YouTube channel or SoundCloud. So the quotes I'm going to leave you with is one that I just really struck me. It says, your body communicates as well as your mouth. Don't contradict yourself. That's by Rudock. And then body language is a very powerful tool. We had body language before we had speech. Apparently, 80% of what we understand in conversation is read through the body and not the words, by Deborah Bull. Wow. Very powerful. So I thank you so much for listening in, and welcome back, right? And remember to live abundantly, love your authenticity, and radiate organic happiness. But most importantly, live a life of no more trauma. Namaste. Trauma free. Bye.